This is Comic Book Lexicon. I'm Stephen Thomas.
And I'm Joshua of Grand Rapids.
And today we're looking at the Marvel graphic novel Daredevil, Black Widow, Abattoir. This book was published in 1993. It's written by Jim Starlin. The art is by Joe Chiodo. And the lettering is by Janice Chiang. Before we get into it, let's talk about, this is what we call a Marvel graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're younger, or even for me, like, the word graphic novel was already sort of in the vocabulary of comics when I started reading comics.
Yeah.
But this idea of a singular graphic novel being published by Marvel in the 80s or whatever was like a newer thing.
Yeah. They hardly invented the word. Like, I've heard some people say that Eisner did, but I've also heard that it predates that a little bit. But regardless, it wasn't really a word in the industry until Mouse came out.
Right.
Mouse drops, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to put out a graphic novel. I think when they collected Watchmen, they called it a graphic novel instead of, a trade paperback, which it was.
Yeah.
But Marvel got in the game really early in the 1982 through 1993, put out a bunch of pieces that were intended to be self-contained stories, and they often veered a little bit more adult, or at least tackled more challenging material.
So this is the last of that series of graphic novels that they published in 1993. You said the first one was 1982?
Yep. Death of Captain Marvel, also written by Jim Starlin, right. So he kind of bookends the whole experiment.
Sure. So just so people know, abattoir, if you're not familiar with that term, it means slaughterhouse.
Yeah, it's used for slaughterhouse. It's used for torture chamber.
Yeah.
It's got a couple different usages, but the floor always looks like this.
Yeah. So if they would have called this slaughterhouse, you might have a better idea of what's inside of it. It is do you want to the heaviness of this?
Yeah. Jim Starlin is pretty death obsessed. He invented Thanos, it's right in the name. Like, your two guiding elements in your life are supposed to be, sex and death, and those are Thanos and Eros. So he invents Thanos, and then a couple years later, he kills Captain Marvel of cancer.
Yeah, that's a heavy topic to have in a comic book.
And then he ends this with, like, what, for lack of a better way of explaining it, I'd call it American superhero giallo. Mm-hmm. Like, you've got these detective noir elements, but it's also edging into horror territory, and there's some yuckiness and psychological fuckery to it that would befit, like, Argento or Fulci or whoever.
Yeah, it's definitely like a serial killer horror kind of story. To me, it's sort of a genre bending story, but you're not going to hear this on our channel a lot, but there is some child sexual abuse trigger, like, we will give a trigger warnings for that.
Yeah.
So if that is something that you think could bother you, then this might not be the video for you to watch. And that doesn't mean that all of our content is going to have that in it, but with this one and with that topic especially, we thought we'd give a trigger warning. So, all right, well, should we look at this thing?
Absolutely.
All right. Very carefully try to pick this up.
Clear the stage.
Yeah. So it starts with these dossiers or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that a good word for those? And now the whole thing is painted.
Yes.
Joe Chiodo.
Who, like, he's usually known for, like, cheesecakey female pinup stuff. And like he's good at painting beautiful women, but like it's kind of like the Joseph Michael Linser thing where he gets pigeonholed into painting pretty girls, but like clearly really good at this type of shit also.
Yeah, I mean, look at the skull here. I'm sure he's probably done some album cover artwork, I'm assuming, just from looking at some of these paintings.
Yeah, like you could see him doing something for Danzig or
Totally.
someone that very much wants to be Danzig.
Yeah, totally. So the story starts out in Black Widow and this other agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. are hung up on chains in this torture chamber.
And this third agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been eviscerated.
Yes.
Like it's talked about pretty strongly, implicitly, not really graphically, but that he's just like gutted. Like stuff has been pulled out of him and everything.
Yeah. And this character Rose, is she unique to this story? Or is this the first time that we meet her in this?
I think you would have to hop on the wiki to know.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say I think she's unique to this story. If she's shown up in Marvel since, it was probably because of this. I've never heard of her.
I haven't either.
Else.
No. And then, though, this story basically it starts with them in this torture chamber, and then, we cut away, and then we start to figure out how they ended up there, right?
Yeah. Like this, if you turn back just a second, like, as she's going through all this pain, she's remembering the agent who basically pulled her out of working for the KGB and working with the United States.
Okay.
So, like, not being the femme fatale that's, like, just having sex with people and killing them, but being a spy and whatever. And Nick Fury shows up to say that she's been murdered. And that's where this all gets kicked off.
It all starts, yeah.
And he kind of like gaslights her into rejoining S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, oh, I just came here to tell you that this woman that took you out of communist Russia, I just came here to tell you that she's dead. I can't give you any more details, though, because it's all S.H.I.E.L.D. classified, and you don't work for S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore.
Yeah. And then Daredevil shows up. Or it talks about Daredevil. Let's see. And then, Black Widow and Daredevil, they meet up and they're talking about it, right?
Yeah, because Fury briefs her, and you kind of read about it while they're showing all that Daredevil stuff. He briefs her on how someone in New York City, or New York in general, but I think they really focus on Manhattan, is killing psychics.
It's like Lower Manhattan, I think they even say it somewhere in here.
So the agent that got murdered was murdered because she's psychic, and all these other psychic agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are getting picked off.
Yep.
She brings Daredevil in because they've been romantically and professionally involved before.
And then they have these other agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. she's following these other agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as like bait almost, right?
They take like the last two agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that have not been moved out of state that are psychic and leave them in the city as bait for her to tail as simultaneous protection and,
to draw out the people who are the serial killer or whatever. And then we meet this guy who, this is incredible.
Yeah. I'm really happy this is here. You know what that is?
That's like, you see in like old movies and stuff,
yeah,
right?
I only saw him in cartoons when I was a kid. For years, I thought there was some inside joke in cartoons about beating the shit out of people with beaver tails. But yeah, it's a blackjack. It's the band of flexible steel wrapped in leather.
Yeah. So she attacks this guy, and then she gets surprised by there's someone in the van, opens the van, and it's and then she's lights out.
Yeah, they don't show who it is, but
Yeah.
we find out that it's Rose later.
And then, Shield and Daredevil are both like, oh, she's gone, and they gotta try to find her. But they're tracking her. They're trying to track her or whatever.
And I think with Matt Murdock's involvement, they also found out, like, he had the idea to look for anyone in New York that might have been psychic that was murdered.
Yeah. How about
and
this?
So he brought into this whole thing. So he's going to remain important.
This is great. I love this. This is very painterly or whatever. So then, this made me laugh. Is Daredevil hijacks this taxi driver?
This is so Frank Miller to me.
And of course, and they
100% over the top.
They have to like address it that Daredevil's blind and he's now driving a cab.
Yeah, and they're very matter of fact about it. Like, this is a dumb idea, and if you're in New York, you should be angry and afraid because a blind man is driving a cab in the snow on the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever.
That was the one thing in this book that made me laugh really hard.
I cracked up.
So then it comes back to the torture chamber, and Black Widow's now there with the agent. And she's putting her spell, or she's like manipulating him with her mind or whatever.
Yeah, she's doing her psychic jam.
Yeah. This is great. Sort of like pulls you down this way.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, at this point, this is where it gets like starts to get kind of strange, because Black Widow, she falls into this woman Rose.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of led to believe, at least, that as she's getting enthralled by this violence and pain that she's dealing out, she's kind of just emitting this psychic feedback.
Yeah.
Of like her innermost self.
Yeah. And then so Black Widow like gets kind of falling into her memories and things like that. So she starts to see where this character comes from. And this is a pretty heavy 2 pages.
Yeah.
And it so starts to describe the not only physical but sexual abuse that this character is. I'm not really sure how to put it, but this was the panel that really, the way the figure is kind of abstracted, then it just shows the zipper. I was like, oh man,
it's very rough, and he says, if I can't beat sense into you with my fists, I'll have to beat it into you with this, basically. Like, it's really rough,
disturbing, and you can even see like he heightens it by having Black Widow like, oh, I can't even look at this or whatever. Yeah. And then, of course, it's got her mother is telling her like to stop making things up and things like that.
You're trying to break up me and your father, like being the horrible mom that you hear about in these stories. Yeah. It's like a very consistent thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so she's trying to find a way out. And now she's putting the spell on him, and he's gonna take the knife and stick it into his own chest.
Yeah, he and you can. This is so gnarly. You see him just like a zombie dig into himself. He can't stop. He's screaming, but like you see the knife, like that's already like. Imagine the knife that was sitting right here, being as far in as that blade is, and now it's like. That's just like under the entire pectoral muscle, pulling it away from the ribs. That's like.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
And Rose is just laughing, and Natasha can't deal with it, and now she's back in Rose's head.
Yeah. It shows some more terrible memories that Rose had.
Yeah, Dad kills Mom by knocking her down the stairs.
Yeah.
And the cops kind of see it as an open and closed accident, so Rose realizes that she's in charge of her own destiny.
Yeah.
And the only example she's seen for how to be in charge of your own life is her dad.
Yeah. And she says, you know, Daddy's got to pay for what he did to Mom.
Mm-hmm. And she starts talking about all the things she's done when she started to realize she had this psychic power. And so she's influencing kids at school to get in fights and do fucked up shit like stick their tongue on frozen flagpoles, or maybe I'll just make a kid jump in front of a car. Like, she's a very fucked person.
Yeah, and it's like, it says harmless pranks most of the time, but you know what they say about power corrupting. So, like, it's showing the escalation.
Yeah.
And then it talks about what she does to her dad. She walks him up to the roof of their building and convinces him to step off. Then this scene cuts back to Daredevil, and at this point his taxi is broken down and he's out in the snow.
Yeah.
This, for some reason...
I think previous to this, they say something really insane, like he's driving through 18 inches of snow. And he's like, now like my radar powers are having a real hard time because the snow is so deep. It's like driving in conditions like a sighted person would have an impossible time keeping the car in control.
This reminded me of Frank Miller a lot for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why, just the pose and then the that kind of car being like kind of on its side, like at that.
And not even just Daredevil Frank Miller, but like Sin City Frank Miller with the beams going off. Like, it's very, very composed, very designy.
Cuts back to the torture scene, and we see this guy with the... God.
One thing we met, when her mom is kind of pinning the tail on the abuse. Oh, you don't even have to flip back. Yeah. She says, "You can't break me and your dad up. What do you think you are, special? You're not special." And so she's been killing all these psychics because she is special.
Yeah.
But she has to be the only special one.
Yeah, it's like a complex. So, yeah, it brings us back here. And this is really interesting to me. This whole storyline with this other character that Rose has, because this was one of the first telepaths or whatever that she...
He wasn't a telepath.
Oh, he wasn't?
No. He was just some run-of-the-mill serial killer that she ran into while she was being a serial killer.
I must have missed that.
We're doing the same kinds of things in the same places, and she glommed onto him because his inner world showed her how he thought about death and about killing, and like the art and the staging and like all the sick shit serial killers take very seriously. This universe that he's built for him, and where it's almost like this sanctimonious thing.
Yeah, it says it's all like some grand epic play to Charlie.
Yeah.
This shack is the stage he built and cherishes it. He relishes the dramatic build-up, the life and death suspense, a good climax. But what he loves more than anything is, and then it just finishes with this guy dying. At this point, she's, like, in her head, she's calling out to Daredevil. And then she picks up on that, and she's like, "Charlie, we got company coming." Like, basically, like, they know Daredevil's coming.
She's been trying to wrest her wrist out of this shackle, most specifically, and to keep Rose off of her scent as she's trying to escape. She's been trying to think of anything except her freeing her hand as she's physically doing that.
Yeah.
And that's what brings her to accidentally kind of just like in her head, out of desperation, call out to Matt.
Yeah. So here's Daredevil. He finds the cabin where they are, and then he has it out with Charlie.
Even more Sin City. Our hero arrives at the shack, and we're gonna have fists versus axes. Even
like the dramatics of this, where he's like falling apart, he's freezing, and then this is very Sin City to me. Gotta pull it together. Tosh needs me. Can't fail her now.
Like, and I also can't decide if it's kinky or not, because they were romantically involved, but they also, fought people together. So, there's multiple ways that they could have been exposed to each other's blood, but he smells blood in the air because of his heightened senses. And then he specifically notices that it's Tasha's blood. That was pretty unique to me.
Yeah. Like you don't think about it then when you put it together. You're like, oh wait. I love this part right here. So they're fighting and he has him down, and then Rose comes up from behind and hits him on the head. And
with
then
a crowbar.
As he turns around, Charlie puts this big axe in his shoulder.
Yeah, and it looks thoroughly buried.
Yes.
Like, Matt should not have use of his arm for, like, a year.
And what I like about this, I mean, the whole torture chamber thing is definitely like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe. But something about her being like, get the chains. And then him dragging him in like an animal.
And, I mean, they psychologically set the stage for you to cringe hearing that earlier, because every time we're in this shack, this abattoir, there's these meat hooks hanging from the ceiling. So you hear "get the chains," and you just picture like the end of Night of the Living Dead, where he's getting dragged off with hooks and whatnot.
Yep. Now they're talking to him, and Black Widow is able to get free, and she's fighting Charlie. And she has the chain that was on her hand wrapped around Charlie's neck. And
she's gonna Jabba the Hutt him.
Yeah, and Rose is like basically like, if you don't let him go, I'm gonna slit Daredevil's throat. And and Black Widow calls her bluff and chokes him out.
And before we turn, this might be my favorite spread in the whole book.
Yeah, this is pretty impressive.
It's pretty vanilla at first glance, but then you realize this is a 2-page spread across the same floor against the same wall. It's very Sergio Leone. Like, you've got this wide shot intercut with all these close-ups of eyes.
Yeah.
It's so tight.
Yes.
I'm going to rip it off.
What's interesting, too, is that the perspective of it, like the camera's just slightly turned like this. You see the floor.
Yeah, they Dutch it a little bit.
And you see her, she's like slightly forward from her, so it's like this, I don't know, it's like this really nice.
You also get a full look at how grisly the scene is. You got the bloody chainsaw there. You've got this fucking rib cage here. There's an eyeball in that skull. That's still an eyeball in the skull that they're using as a candle holder.
That's ghoulish. And so she chokes out, and she says something here. She says, let's find out just how special you really are.
Yeah. Basically, she knows she can pull Rose off of Matt if she, like, uses that word.
Yeah.
If she throws the S word out there, it's going to...
She triggers her and challenges her, yep. So now they're fighting. And at some point, Black Widow realizes that the rage that Rose had was like a ploy, or she was trying to draw her close to her so that she could...
now they're having the same knife party that she was with the...
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And so now Black Widow is getting ready to cut herself. And this is great. I mean...
Yes.
It's gorgeous. I don't know if this would be as effective if the coloring wasn't so beautiful or not, but...
And I also don't know if it would exist without the grunt work done a few years earlier with Daredevil Love and War by Sienkiewicz. And
Miller. Yeah, definitely. You can definitely feel Sienkiewicz's
This tight
influence.
little grid is very Sienkiewicz and very Miller simultaneously.
And then Daredevil is able to kick her in the back, and Black Widow stabs her through the heart.
Yeah.
Now this is where it gets interesting. This is the part where, like, when you brought up Dario Argento, where as she's dying,
you just get
all of a sudden they're kissing.
We've not been connected, but you forgot you were in my head. So here's a brief sapphic moment. before I die and smear blood on your tits.
Yeah, and they kiss, and then she falls, and it's like, I don't know. It's a very interesting.
And then, if there's never been a more jarring cut in anything, we're cutting from fucking
A torture shack.
Lucio Fulci. We're lucky we didn't see a splinter of wood go through an eyeball, to just this Michael Bay shot of the fucking helicarrier. Because everything needs a little Kirby, even if it's really fucked up.
Yes. Well, and what's cool here is like this sequence to me is where his like pinup shit comes out.
Yeah.
Like these kind of pouty faces that Black Widow has here, and like loving, kind of like she's annoyed. I don't know. It's
Matt's
this is a
watching
great scene.
over her, and he asks, "Are you okay?" And she shoots him this look, and she's like, "What do you think? I've been through hell and back, and I had this fucked up person in my head, and I don't know where the monster ends or begins because I remember who I was before.
Yeah.
And I also ended my night stabbing this person in the chest.
Yeah.
And, like, you turn, and she talks about, so ended my night stabbing this person in the chest.
Yeah.
And, like, you turn, and she talks about how she wants to be alone. He leaves, and she tries to just, like, pull some sort of everyday routine out of this. But as she goes to the shower, she realizes she can't do anything to feel clean.
Yeah. And this is like you see a lot in movies, they bring that feeling up that people have.
Yeah.
Who have PTSD and things like that. But it's interesting to see it in this one because she's just been through like this grizzly fucking experience or whatever. I don't know.
And I've been there, so I get it. I've never stabbed anyone in the chest, but I've been sexually assaulted. I have PTSD. I've had moments where I disassociate because something triggers me and I walk away and don't remember a couple hours of my life.
You feel like you lost that time.
Yeah, and then you feel grime. Like it's hard to explain, but this is very real. But I guess the only reason I bring that up is maybe I get it on a certain level and most people wouldn't, but I'd rather cast doubt on that because I'm going to flip back and return the page just one more time. I think the last bit of text in this whole book, and this is a criticism, like a constructive criticism, but it's not saying that the end is crap and this is the way it should be. I just think it would be better if this was the last text. How are you doing? And she shoots him this look, and then the art just carries you all the way through because it's all there. Like he's sitting there and she's sitting there. He hugs her and she closes her eyes, but then he realizes like
you're not okay.
that like I'm here at this point for me more than I am for you, and he leaves. And she tries to, like, pull herself together, and she can't.
Yeah. Well, this is a very important panel to me because when someone's dealing with something that's so heavy like this, it's interesting because what happens is the other person is trying to comfort them.
Yeah.
But this person almost has to go out of their way to be like,
yes,
everything is okay. Like, just let me, I just need to be by myself or whatever. So she's like signaling to him like I still care about you, whatever, but I just need to be by myself.
Yeah. I just told you that everything I'm feeling is a claustrophobic thing. And so maybe the last thing I need right now is another person in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, so that, to me, that's a really important panel right there. So, overall, this book it's a really interesting and unique.
It's not that I've read every Marvel graphic novel, but I have like 10, 12 of them.
Mm-hmm.
This is my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, when you had mentioned it to me, I was like, all right, I'll find it. And I read it, and I was just like, wow, this is I'm surprised that no one has brought this up to me before.
I grabbed it on a whim because it was available to me. You will not have an easy time finding this book for, like, it hasn't been reprinted that I know of. So if it's not on, like Marvel's digital comic site, I don't even remember what it's called, Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah, I don't know.
If it's not there, you're going to have to download it illegally. And if you don't want to do that, if you want a physical copy, good luck, because it'll land you anywhere between like $80 and over $100.
It doesn't come up very often.
Yeah, I got this for $20.
Yeah.
I was like, sucker.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I'd, read it and that would be enough and have my curiosity satisfied and sell it for what I bought it for and just, pay it forward. Like,
yeah, totally.
But instant favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really impressed. So I'm glad that we did this. The perfect time for...
Yeah, it's spooky season, and so there's not a whole lot of comics that cover that aren't already, trodden to death. Like, I don't know of a lot of people talking about this.
No. So, yeah, we wanted the first one that we did to be something unique. We hope you guys have a happy Halloween. We're going to have a lot more content coming soon. Both of our Instagrams are going to be in the description of this video, as well as we're starting our,
we'll have a Instagram of this YouTube channel, basically, that's like a visual companion to the channel. I think that wraps it up.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye.